Well guys, it's time to address the elephant in the backyard. Now I've been building this M104 Turbo Sleeper for years now and it's still slow. In fact, it's making less power than ever. So in this video, I'll be adding the one thing missing all along, and that is more fuel. If we want to make good power, we need a lot of fuel. To explain the situation, we need to rewind to the year 2021 when I started this build by selling the 1.8 litre M271 compressor engine and bought this M104.995 from a local junkyard. Reusing the 6-speed manual from the old engine that simply bolted on, upgraded the stock clutch and a few modifications to the shifter, custom engine mounts with a custom oil pan, and finally cutting a chunk of the chassis to squeeze this monstrous engine in there. I also built my first ever turbo manifold and custom intake, along with the intercooler and all the boost pipes. And with that, the M104 was officially boosted. Needless to say, I was immediately addicted to it. Now, I was curious to see some power numbers as we tuned the car on the road, and it felt really good. But on the way to the dyno, a cracked radiator caused the engine to overheat. Hoping for the best and just getting a new radiator in there for the dyno appointment, unfortunately the first of many head gaskets failed, causing the engine to hydrolock on the way there. Luckily, with the help of a few good mates, we fixed the head gasket and had the car back up and running again in no time. Time to try again, back to the dyno to get those numbers. For what it is, it made some decent numbers, and not just that, it made enough to keep up with a supercharged V8 E55 AMG. However, it did come at a price. That little race cost me the second head gasket. This time, fixing the head gasket, I decided to add a 1mm head spacer to drop the compression down a bit, and also lap the valves and get new valve stem seals into the 20 valve head. And that brings us to the latest and greatest mistake. Thinking I could hit the page up button without any consequences. I will say, I got the car to accelerate harder than ever before. But again, that didn't last very long. Yep, you guessed it, I blew yet another head gasket. Enough is enough. I decided I need to make some upgrades on the setup so that we can make some decent power, but it has to be a lot more reliable. Here we go again. I got the head skimmed and got a brand new head gasket in there with that 1mm head spacer, and build a better flowing, more efficient turbo manifold for the GT35 Turbo and 76mm downpipe. My opinion is the log style manifold caused some back pressure and then turned into unnecessary heat in the cylinders. It's not the cause for the blown head gaskets, but I think getting the exhaust gases out of the engine in a more efficient way has to be the best way to go. Then I also built a new intake with a bigger 76mm throttle body to have the best flow possible into the engine. With these upgrades and improvements, this definitely had the potential to make more power if we strap it down on the dyno once again. hold on, what? How is it, after all that time and effort put into all the new upgraded parts, is the car making less power? As you can see by the look on my face, I wasn't very happy about that. But it's nothing compared to what it used to be. I don't know. We need more. That's all I can say. The problem is, and always has been, these injectors. They just don't flow enough. So I upgraded the stock M104 injectors with these M271 injectors. So basically the injectors out of the old engine plus 2, because that was a 4-cylinder. From a bit of research, I saw that these injectors are 330cc. And from what I've learned, I usually go by 1cc equals 1 horsepower. So 330cc, we made 333 horsepower on the dyno the first time. So I think the reason why I kept blowing head gaskets is because we were right on the edge of these injectors. Let me start this off by saying the fuel system on an engine is not something you want to mess around with, especially on a boosted application. But I've heard about this idea and I've talked to a few people about it, and I'm willing to give it a try. Plan is to add some extra injectors for some extra fuel. So along with the M271 injectors, I'll be adding another 2 680cc injectors. I got these 2 injectors, plugs and the fuel rail from a good friend. Thanks, Werner. These are actually off a jet ski of all things, but I think it'll work perfect for what I'm trying to do. I have this taken apart just to test it out and to also give it a clean. Getting 12 volt on the injector and using some brake clean. It's interesting to see the 3 different size injectors and their spray patterns. First up, we have the stock M104 injector. My guess is these injectors flow below 200cc. Then we have the M271 330cc injectors. You can already see the difference in the spray pattern, but then we have these big Bosch injectors. These puppies obviously flow a lot more fuel. So if we add these 2 injectors together, we have about 1300cc. And then if we divide that by the 6 cylinders, in theory, we should have around 200cc more for each cylinder. Basically having like a 550cc on each cylinder. Well, that's what I'm hoping for. But okay, I made sure these 2 injectors work and they flow about the same. Now to figure out the wiring for this idea. I'll be using one of the GPO outputs on the PowerMod standalone ECU, and then at a certain RPM the ECU will switch on these 2 new injectors. I have the user manual for the ECU printed out, and I use that to wire up a quick test with a relay, injector plug and LED. With this quick test, I want to connect it up to the ECU and then fire up the car so we can see this idea in action. Like I said, the cool thing about this is that you can set at what RPM you want these injectors to start pulsing. The signal for that I'll get from injector 1 and 6. So as the RPM goes up, the opening and closing of the injectors would also increase. Here you can see it's set on the ECU to switch on idle around 800 RPM, pulsing the injector as I hoped. And then you can also obviously set it to switch on a bit later. this looks pretty promising. So let me start taking things apart so that we can get the intake manifold off the engine and then decide how I'm going to get those two injectors in there. First thing already on the list to do will be to make a new fuel supply line that'll now also supply the two new fuel injectors. So at least for that, I found some fittings laying around. So that one over there, that'll be the feed line into the fuel rail. So I can remake that out of normal rubber hose. And that will then replace this. And then I can put a T into that for the two extra injectors. It'll also be before the fuel pressure regulators. So the pressure on those two new injectors will be the same as the 6 already in there. But that, along with the wiring, is one of the last steps. Before I remove the intake, I have a couple of other things to remove and then also decide where I want to mount these two new injectors. Well, shortly after getting started on this, I saw this massive rainstorm on the horizon. I had no other choice but to call it a day and then continue with it in the morning.
Next morning.
At first I thought of getting these mounted on top of the intake manifold, but I was afraid of clearance issues. By looking at it a bit more, I found that there will be more than enough space on the bottom of it. Now that I have a solid plan, I headed over to a friend and got some fittings and mountings made on the lathe. Getting familiar with how to make things on the lathe opens up so many doors with little custom things like this. And there we go. Now we have the fittings and the mountings for these injectors to go into the intake. The intake was still on the car, so I had to get that off so that we can do this in the workshop. Remove the throttle, injectors, oil dipstick, and finally I could get that intake out and start welding. Let me be the first to say, holy smokes, would you look at that? Everything worked out perfect and this intake looks great. Will it work? I do not know. I'm really hoping it does, but let me get it back on the car and we can see how this turned out. dare I say this, with this, the car now has enough fuel to make 500 horsepower. Now, I'm not going to make 500 horsepower, but if you wanted to, you probably can. So the hardware is sorted out, everything is on there, I have everything plugged in. I do still need to do the wiring for those two injectors. I want to go talk to the tuner, hear his thoughts about this whole situation, and then we'll figure out the best way to get those wired up. I'm really curious to see what you guys think. A lot of you guys know a lot more than me, so please comment down below if you think this is a bad idea. Like, please let me know before I blow this thing up again. The new power goals we have in mind, I think we might blow more than just a head gasket. One thing I am a bit worried about with these two injectors is that we might not get enough fuel or the same amount of fuel to each of the cylinders. So maybe cylinder 1 might get a bit more fuel than cylinder 3. I don't know, that's why I want to go talk to the tuner. Once we get that done, I can get the car on the dyno and we can start turning it up. I'm really excited about that. For now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace! Wait, please give the video a thumbs up. Thanks guys.